Welcome back to our the Gender, Women's Suffrage, and Political Power Conference. I was going to say this is our third event. Unfortunately, though, we had to cancel the keynote by Erin Velarde because of a family emergency, but we're really delighted that we still get to have the expertise of Vote, Run, Lead at the conference today. So my name is Stephanie Nowin. I'm the co-director for academic programs at the Center for Gender in Global Context. And we are one of the co-organizers along with the Department of History at Michigan State and the Institute for Research on Women and Gender at the University of Michigan, one of the co-organizers of this conference. So I want to just, as we're waiting for more participants to come in, people are filing in as they would if we were at an actual conference, bringing their coffee with them and whatnot. I'll just get some housekeeping things out of the way. So we actually, if you have not already registered for the conference panels, I'm afraid that we have reached capacity, but there might be some tickets that become available as we kind of figure out how many people are going to show up to each panel. We might be able to release some more tickets, but right now we're at our max of 300 registrants. But again, check the registration website, and if you were really counting on being able to come, you could also email us, and we probably can get you in for certain sessions at least. Just a reminder, we also have the keynote tomorrow at 6:15 by Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Very excited that she was able to join us for the conference, and there are still tickets available for her talk. So go to the registration website on the GenCen's webpage and register for that. So I will go ahead and introduce our speaker this evening, Shannon Garrett. Shannon is the Chief Strategy Officer for the Michigan Women's Commission, which is really an amazing organization that gencen has been doing some work with them this year, and it's just a great organization with a great mission. Shannon is a nationally recognized trainer, strategist, and leadership coach. Her commitment to advancing equity and inclusion in civic life has introduced her to communities throughout the United States, where she's worked alongside thousands of candidates, elected officials, social activists, and civic-minded organizations. Her consulting firm, SMG Strategies, combines over 25 years of experience with humor, mindfulness, and a no-nonsense approach to building a more active and diverse democracy. Shannon is also a co-founder and board member of Vote, Run, Lead, a national nonprofit training barrier-breaking women to run for political office, and a founding partner of Civicize.me, a backyard civic leadership program. She prioritizes intentionally and directly addressing the impact of intersectionality on political leadership in order to welcome more individuals into the civic space and strengthen our democracy and civic institutions. Shannon is a graduate of Alma College and University of Minnesota Law School. And I also just want to, as a side note, let everyone know that I was told that it was at a Vote, Run, Lead workshop like this one, where the squad got their name, the squad. So I am super excited to have Shannon share her expertise with us today. Please join me in welcoming her to our stage.
Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, thank you for that anecdote. In 2018, after the elections, Vote, Run, Lead pulled together a national town hall that was virtual and brought together those women who are now known as the squad into one room in Washington, D.C. to be a part of our town hall. And when Representative Ocasio-Cortez tweeted it out and said the squad, that's how the name was born. So we're pretty proud of that moment there. So I am going to share my PowerPoint with you real quick here as we get going. There we go. So thank you all for joining us this evening for a bit of a talk about how you can lead a political life and get ready to run for office. I just want to say real quick, just to let folks know that this is being recorded. We are asking that you put yourselves on mute if you can, and you're welcome to share your video if you would like. Just know that we're recording it, so you may show up in that recording there. And also please use the chat box as we move forward if you have any questions or concerns. So yes, I am one of the co-founders of Vote Run Lead, and I'm currently on the board, and we are an organization that is national in focus, and we are nonpartisan. Our goal is to train women to run for office and win. And the workshop that we're gonna speed through here today is our 90-day challenge. Excuse me, and I will say here at the top, there's gonna be several times throughout this workshop that I might refer to other resources that are available on the Vote Run Lead website. There's over 80 resources, recordings, different workshops that are available there for any piece of the running for office campaign life that you would have questions about. You're welcome to all those free resources there. But today what we're gonna do is our 90-day challenge. So what we'll walk through here are 30 actions that you can take over the next 90 days to get ready to kickstart your own campaign for elected office. And I know we've just come out of an election cycle, and a lot of people might roll their eyes at thinking about an election already, but you know, thinking about how there are so many different offices in this country to run for, and right here in Michigan that we have elections every single year. So while we just came off of our presidential elections, you know, the congressional races, county, all those kinds of things, in 2 years we'll have our governor's race, and our entire state senate will be up, the state House of Representatives, our county offices, so there's all of those. But then in the in-between years here in Michigan is when our city elections happen. So there's always something for you to think about whether or not you might be a good fit to run for one of those offices. Excuse me. So again, just a slide about me. So the agenda of what we're gonna spend the next 50 minutes talking about is, first we'll talk a little bit about what power is, why does it matter, why now is the time for you to be thinking about how fitting elected office into your career plans, why now is the time to be doing that. Then we'll get into the 90-day challenge itself, and then we will wrap up. Along the way, again, if you have questions, just pop them in the chat box there, and we'll keep it moving. So speaking of the chat box, just to kick things off, I'd like to ask for you to type in the chat box when I say the word power. What do you think of? Give me 1 or 2 words that pop into your mind when you hear the word power. What does power mean? Look over here and see. Responsibility, influence, strength, command, control of outcomes, yep. Resilience, speaking out, ability to get things done. I saw earlier responsibility and setting an example for others. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that power appear. But for our purposes, we want to talk about the ways that we think about power is individual, social, and collective power. A lot of times people have a negative connotation to power when we throw that out there. I think that we're coming off a time when we as women and we as voters are feeling pretty powerful at the moment. So I appreciate that there was a lot of positivity behind the comments that were made in the chat box there. But power really is the ability to act based on resources. So it's what you do with the resources you have. And when we're talking in this arena, what the resources are people, money, and time. Time, talent, and treasure, we talk about a lot. And in the political world, in the campaign world, politics is where the power and the resources are wielded, where they're exchanged, and where they're magnified. And it's important to think about it in that way, because in the political world, our resources are limited. So there are very real, there's definitely a timeline. Can't change the time that's there. There are limits on the money that's involved in politics. It might not seem that way sometimes, but there's campaign finance rules about who can give, how much they can give, how much you can accept, where you accept it from. And then when it comes to people, getting people involved in a campaign, getting people to support you in laying the groundwork for your run for office and then showing up to help with your campaign, there's a limited amount that you can ask of their time and their talents and treasure. But politics is really where all of those resources, that power, those resources, how you use them and how you put them together. And it's important because while politics is where all of that power and resource is wielded, it really has an impact on your individual lives. And it's how we use it that makes a difference. So power in and of itself is neutral. Money is neutral. It's how we use it that makes that difference. And so we can think about, in terms of our individual power, we all have power in some way. But if we can collect it together with social power, we can create more of a movement, and then collective power is where we can really see change start to happen. And at Vote, Run, Lead, we really are always thinking about that in terms of the power that lies within politics and the ability to make the systemic changes that we want to see. And so we encourage women to harness the power that we have, to put that together with other women, other people around us in our community, to do things like lobbying, changing laws, changing policies, and to really put that collective power into action by running for office, getting elected, and being at the table to make those decisions. Because politics really is the marketplace. It's the power is the currency that makes the marketplace work. So it's about collecting together the resources that you have around you, the people, the time that you have available to you, the money that you can collect to try to impact those policies. Because politics impacts you in every aspect of your life. So there's the explicit ways that politics impact your life and how you live, based on things like, who can legally drive, who can legally vote, who can come into this country, who can stay in this country, what you get arrested for. All of those kinds of things are explicit ways that politics impact your life. But then there's the implicit ways. And that's really a lot about things like generational wealth. So the sort of underlying ways that politics impact your life based on what kind of cars you're allowed to drive, how wealth is passed from one family member, one generation to another, how it's even built up in the first place. Where you work, it comes into play around cultural competencies and hiring practices and ways that implicit bias might show up in the workplace in the hiring practices. Excuse me. And also who you vote for and how you vote. The actual mechanics of voting, and who's allowed to run for office and who's allowed to participate in the democratic process. So power and politics matter, and that's where we really want to see more women thinking about how is it that I'm going to, or when am I going to run for office in my lifetime? And the time for you to be thinking about this is now. It's always been time for women to run for office, but now is a pivotal time for women across ages, across race and ethnicity, across parties, to be thinking about running for office, because there's so much that's happened, even just this year of 2020, that has really put the spotlight on the systemic problems that we have in this country. Things like the racial disparities in the outcomes with COVID-19, the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, all of the police killings that we saw over the summer, which we know did not just happen in 2020, but here's a time where people were hyper-focused on what was happening in the world around them. And when I say people, white people were waking up to what people of color have been telling us for generations. So we are the ones we've been waiting for. And we saw that happen just in this last election cycle. The spotlight has been up here on the presidential election, but when you really start to look down at the ground level and who was elected around you, things were really interesting. I know we as Vote Run Lead had, let me find my note here, about how many women we had running for office. We had 221 alumni on the November 3rd ballot. And we had 71% of the women of color won their races in our alumni pool. 55% overall won their races. And it's really showing how people are ready for women's leadership. It might not always look that way when you're watching national news, but clearly the voters are speaking at the grassroots level that they want to see governments locally that more accurately reflect the people around them. So now is the time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. So this is the 90-day challenge that we'll get into here. I know an email went out earlier giving you a heads up about the worksheets. You do not need to have downloaded the worksheets beforehand. They look pretty simple. There's a recap list of the 30 things that I'm going to talk about here. And then there's a worksheet that you can use for yourself along the way, either in this workshop, but I definitely, after the workshop, to take some time really diving into each of these 30 things and a good way for you to track it. So the number one thing, so thinking about the next 90 days, 30 things you can do, the number one thing is to know, why would you want to run for office in the first place? That is always going to be a question when you're running for office. The first question usually is why are you running in the first place? And I just noticed in a chat, Lauren Cacciola, I hope I'm saying your name right, is actually one of our Vote Run Lead alumni who took a workshop this spring and won her town council, came in second place. That's great. Congratulations, Lauren. So Lauren probably had to answer that question a few times about why are you running for office? And one of the tools that we use for this is the I'm qualified to lead statement. And as I mentioned before, Vote Run Lead has a lot of resources online. We have whole workshops dedicated to just this knowing your why and being able to articulate why you're running for office. So for the purposes of the next 90 days, thinking about, why are you qualified to lead? How are you qualified to lead in different ways? Excuse me. And when we talk about being qualified to lead, we want to think about how we would present that to the public, and in particular the voting public. But these same types of tips can work when you're trying to lead in the workplace or lead in your community on a ballot measure or something like that. But people, when they're hearing about why you're qualified to lead, they want to hear something that has both fact and feeling to it, that speaks to their head, speaks to their intelligence, and speaks to their heart. So thinking about why you're the best person to run for this office or why you're qualified to lead, we encourage you to take some time to think about what words you would put in there. I'm qualified to lead because I have been living and working in this community for the past 20 years, and I've been involved in for me, it would be the Holland Human Relations Commission, and I've seen up close and personal the impact that some of our city policies have on communities who weren't necessarily born and raised in this community. So thinking about the different ways that you're qualified to lead. The second thing you can do over the next 90 days is to inventory your base. So this is something that we encourage you to take some time. It's not just a sit down and in 1 hour do it, but I would think about start setting up some spreadsheets for yourself There's different apps that you can use for this. I'm a little old school and go with the Excel spreadsheets, but thinking about who are all the different people that you know, how do you know them? What is your relationship to them? And this is a good way for you if you're not quite sure that you could run for office and you think, I don't know that I would have enough support. If you take that time to sit down and really inventory your base and think about who you know and who you know and who they know, you'll start to see that collection of fish in one of those earlier slides is much bigger than you think it is. So thinking about who do you work with? Who have you volunteered with? Who did you go to school with? Who are you currently going to school with? And really start laying those out in some sort of spreadsheet kind of way so that you can later go back and start to put those people in buckets, we'll say. Like, this is a group of people I'm going to go to ask for funding. This is a group of people that I can ask to make introductions for me, those kinds of things. So that's something, and the holidays are coming up. People have some downtime. This is a good time to really start inventory your base. The third is then to have virtual coffee dates. So pre-COVID, we would say have actual coffee dates, but now we're in the virtual world with 2020, and it's actually made it easier to ask people for a meeting in a lot of cases. So you just inventoried your base. You just saw this group of people that you know and that are willing to support you in different ways. Start with one. Ask one if they could meet you online just to talk a little bit about, what sort of leadership ambition you have and what they think about it. Or sometimes it's, calling somebody up and saying, I want to be where you are. I want to be on the city council like you are, or I want to be the CEO of this organization that you aspire to be. So ask them if you could just meet them online for 30 minutes and hear their story about how they got to where they are. And that's a good way for you to start picking up these tips and tricks, but it's also a good way for them to get to know you, because then they will go out and advocate on your behalf as well, usually. And if you don't know a lot of people, or you're trying to get to a certain person over here, ask the person you're meeting with to recommend some other people for you to talk to. And what you'll find is really quickly, word gets around, especially if you're looking at those local offices, those, city, township, school board, county seats, all of those kinds of places where if you really look at your own backyard, you'll see likely the same people, likely the same old white guys, have been running for those seats over and over and over, and may not always have challengers. So if you're starting to raise your hand a little bit and say, I'm interested in this, people will start talking about you. They'll start making introductions. They'll say, you should talk to this person. They know everything about running a campaign in this community. All those kinds of things will come up. The fourth thing is to, get to know more about the issues. So there's the issues that you yourself care about, and you can, start to build your platform a little bit more, and learn about the different ins and outs, so that in the fifth part you can become an expert. So when you're educating yourself more about these issues, you can speak with some fluency on them and some authority on the different issues that you care about or issues that are important in your community, and then go out and start keeping yourself informed on what's happening currently, how that issue is impacting people locally or in the district that you're running in. So choose a couple of issues and read an article per day on each issue. There might not be a local article on it, but out there in the Googleverse somewhere is some news on that topic. And that then leads you into learning the landscape. So your virtual coffee dates are going to help you get to know the political environment more. But there's probably some other research that you're gonna need to do. So try to figure out and use your virtual coffee dates to help you with this. Figure out who are the players. You know, sometimes they're called the kingmakers or the queenmakers or whose ring you have to kiss or whatever it is. You know, find out who are those key opinion shapers in your community, and what does it look like? How are people politically engaged in this community? Are there, you know, is there a quiet, yeah, I'll use myself as an example. I live in Holland, Michigan, which is typically considered to be a very conservative, Republican leaning area. I am myself am not. I am a Democrat on the liberal side. And so when I first moved back into this community, you know, I felt like, well, there's nobody else out there like me. And it takes a little bit of talking to other people. And then you find out, okay, there is this quiet community of people who think like me, who, you know, maybe I can be involved with and help activate a little bit. But, you know, it's not to say that you necessarily need to meet all of those power players right away, but the quicker that you can get introduced to them, or at least know what's going on, know what you're working with in this community. And then next is to start actually attending the meetings of that government body that you're thinking about running for. So if you're thinking about running for school board, go watch the school board meetings or watch the state legislative hearings. And I know it's a little bit awkward now, and the meeting schedules have been thrown off a little bit with the pandemic and virtual, but even when we're not living in a virtual meeting world, usually each of these meetings are broadcast on a local access channel, or you can show up in person. And it's also a good way. You'll find this picture is can be somewhat misleading if you live in a smaller community. Sometimes you'll have like here in Holland, you'll have a city council meeting, and you know there might be 4 or 5 people in the audience. So you know, show up. That's also an opportunity to meet your elected officials in person, either if you're actually there in person or virtually online. Another way to say, I'm thinking about doing this, or I would like to be where you are, and maybe start shadowing them. Elected officials love to talk about themselves and how they got to where they are. And when you become an elected official, you'll also want to talk about it, because you know that that's what is helping to inspire and bring other people along from your community. And then we want to talk a little bit about recording a video or writing a blog or doing some more public statements about your thoughts on these issues. So you've started to become an expert in this area. You're keeping abreast of what's going on with that issue, either nationally or in your community. And now let's start to raise your profile a little bit by putting yourself out there as that expert and sharing your thoughts. And that's going to help you get more comfortable about sharing your opinions publicly, about labeling yourself as an expert, being able to speak with authority on those issues. The number 9 is our local political party. So every community has usually at least a Democratic Party and a Republican Party. And in some cases, there's a plethora of other political parties in between there. But find out what's going on in your area. When you figure out which party your most values aligned with, reach out to them and set up a face-to-face meeting, a virtual meeting at this point, but just talk to them, ask them about how you can get involved. Maybe you've already been doing that. If you're in this training, you're likely someone who's been a little bit political active at least. So just talk to them a little bit more about, you know, one-on-one, what is it that I can do to help get more involved and help engage more people in our political process. And number 10 is where we encourage you to reach out to the elected officials yourself on specific issues. Reaching out to an elected official, asking them to vote yes or no on something that's coming up. There's always legislation happening at the state level, at the federal level, even though, for example, the Michigan legislature is on a recess now, which happens every year around deer hunting season. But there's still bills that are out there. And so getting in the habit of reaching out and doing this type of lobbying, of reaching out to your elected official and asking them to vote yes or no on something helps raise your visibility a little bit more, helps lend more credence to you as an expert on a topic. Also just helps you get in the rhythm of political action and political power. And again, these are spread out over the next 90 days. So we don't expect you to do all this tomorrow. But another thing that we encourage folks to do is to sign up for a few different email lists or e-blasts or e-newsletters or whatever they're calling it. But find some community organizations that are out there, some think tanks, different activist advocacy organizations, and sign up for their email lists so that you can stay in touch with what's going on and what kind of advocacy they're doing around specific issues. And we always encourage that at least one of them be a newsletter or an email list that is a different viewpoint than yours, so that you can sort of see how narratives get shaped in the political world. Number 12 is donating to a political cause. And again, we just came off some really high profile, high energy elections, and hopefully most of you made some donations, even if they were, $2 donations here and there. Every dollar counts, and we definitely encourage you to donate not only to the candidates, but to think about the political causes. So when you are doing that political landscape early on in this process and you're finding out who's doing collective action around which issues, you'll start to find out that there are some groups that are doing more organizing or doing better organizing, or who are organizing around the issues that you care about. And we encourage you to donate to them. Donating gets you on their email lists as well. But it's also showing that you care about the cause. And when we talk about donating, we're not saying you have to write the $1 million check. Again, every $5, every $10 helps a cause, especially at the local level. So consider making those donations. And then once you've gotten comfortable making your own donations, ask a friend to donate to that charity or to that cause. And again, doesn't have to be the $1 million check, but calling up a friend or emailing a friend, but I would encourage you to call up a friend and say, hey, I just gave, I just made a $25 contribution to my local Planned Parenthood. And I encourage you to make a contribution as well. Or, you know what, I just did this thing where I contributed $10 to the Sierra Club. And if you match me, then it's going to, double the impact of what I just did. And the reason that you're doing that is because it's going to help get you more comfortable asking people to make donations. And fundraising is often one of the reasons that we hear from women around why they don't want to run for office, is because they don't like raising money or they don't want to ask for money. And this is a way to start shifting your perspective around going back to what power is. It's the people, the time, and the money. And so if you can start seeing the impact of the dollars that you give, and then also seeing the responses from your friends when you're asking them to join you in that giving, it's going to help make you more comfortable asking for money when you run for office, because you become the cause, because you're bringing these issues to the forefront of the public debate. And then next, we also encourage you to join a new organization. So, you may be involved with some groups nationally or locally. Look out there and see if there's another cause for you to get involved with. And I would encourage you to do that in a way that's sort of stepping outside your typical circle. So finding, what other organizations are operating in your community that you could join with. And and again, speaking as a white ally in this particular interest, not that I'm going to show up and tell you how to do things better, but that I know that this is a community that I'm not necessarily a part of on a day-to-day basis. I'm not walking the same path in the world, but how can I help? How can I help support your organization and find ways to be an ally in different ways in your community? And then start volunteering. So volunteering with those organizations is great, but we encourage you to start volunteering with campaigns, with actual political campaigns and candidate campaigns, so that you can get out there and get experience with door knocking, with phone banking, with putting together the different mailers. Again, we're still in this pandemic, but people found all sorts of creative ways to do campaigning and to bring volunteers in virtually. And again, we just came off that other election, but other elections are already starting. So just as an example, one of our alumni and a national trainer for Vote Run Lead, Tashara Jones, is the treasurer of St. Louis, Missouri. And almost as soon as the election ended this year, she announced that she was running for mayor. So campaigns are starting up right now for next year. Look out there, see who's running for office locally and how you can volunteer to help them out. And since we're coming up here in the holiday times, even though we're not getting together in person, hopefully we're all taking COVID seriously and doing it virtually. This is a good time to start talking to your family and friends about the fact that you're even thinking about it. I think that I might want to run for state representative maybe in the next couple of years. What do you think about that? And sort of get their feedback, start practicing your why. This is why I'd want to run for this seat. This is what I think that I could do with this seat. If they live in that same district, say, here's how my running and winning could impact you and your life. And it's just a way for you to start, again, building that confidence and that authority that you can speak with about why you're running for office, and the positive reinforcement that you'll get. Most of the time you might get a little pushback, but those are learning opportunities too, to think about really getting yourself thinking about running for office, getting practice to talking about why you're running for office, and then also priming the pump for when you want to start fundraising later and asking them for volunteer time, and those kinds of things. Number 17 is around social distancing and communication platforms. So this is one that we've shifted a little bit this year in this in workshop, because now that we couldn't get out in person that much, more stuff was happening virtually and online. And so folks need to start getting comfortable on a number of different platforms. You might already be doing this based on, whether you're in school, whether you teach, all of those types of things. But, every, candidates who were running for office this previous cycle had to very quickly understand what these different platforms were and how to best present on them. Because when you're running for office, there's the events that you're putting on to try to get your message out into the world. But then there's also all those other organizations may have events happening that they're inviting you to come in and present on. So learning about those different platforms is a good way to find the one that feels right for you and the type of atmosphere and the type of vibe you want to give. as a candidate, but also helps you get familiar so that if somebody else says, hey, can you come talk to our group of 30 moms who are concerned about what's happening, with the school board, what the decisions are being made, and you're a candidate running for school board, and you can just jump onto their platform and feel comfortable and confident. Here's a fun one. So the 18th one here is getting political online. And I know that, this is a shifting sands on where people feel about social media and how much you put out there. But if you're thinking about running for office, being able to present a point of view and being able to understand the feedback that you get on that point of view and how you handle it, it's a good time now to start feeling that out so that when you're running for office, you know how to handle it when it comes at you then. But really using it as an opportunity to talk more about the issues that you care about, because it's also helping to elevate your visibility. It's helping to raise your profile as an expert on these issues. And it's also involving asking other people to take action. And so again, that's where that power that we talked about in the beginning, power is what you do with the resources that you have. So you have people that you're friends with on social media or that follow you on social media. They're looking to you for your opinions on things, and you're sharing it. And that's helping you to start building that collective action. 19 here is, okay, 19 is way back in the beginning when we talked about pulling together, doing that inventory of who you know. This is where you really start organizing those folks. Putting together a contact list, sorting people into different categories, who are you going to be fundraising with, who might be able to host fundraisers for you, who can volunteer for you. And when you're doing those coffee dates, those online coffee dates now, it's a good way to start plugging people in to your contact list and thinking about who else should be there. So who are folks that the people you've met with know that should be on your list? Who are you forgetting that you know, which is something that happens often. So I usually encourage when you get ready to start putting together your contact list that you sit down with a couple of good friends or good advisors and go through that list together and do some quick brainstorming around who am I forgetting? Because inevitably, we're always going to forget to put our hairdresser or hairstylist down in that group. We might be forgetting to put down our former professors or our current professors. We might be thinking about or forgetting about our sorority sisters or, any sort of academic or professional associations that you're part of. So really start to put together that contact list, and this is where you really start to fill in like actual names, phone numbers, and emails, and all of that there. This is number 20 is where you really start to look at the voters in the district that you're thinking about running for. And again, with this, it's if you're running in the next election cycle or you're thinking about running, 2 or 4 years from now, this is work that you can start doing now, is to figure out, if I were to run for this, this county commission seat, what does that district look like, on a map? Who lives there? How many people are eligible to vote there? How many are actually registered? How many show up? How do they vote? And so you can always start, well, first of all, knowing that we just went through the census, and so redistricting is going to happen over the next year. So your district might shift a little bit, but this is a good place to start. The party official that you met with earlier might be able to just give you that information right off the top. They have voter files that they can share. If you don't have a voter file or access to a party's voter file, you can just go to your local clerk and ask for this information. They can share numbers, they can share lists of registered voters. That's all public information. What you're getting from your clerk is who is registered to vote and where they live, and which elections they voted in. You will not get how they vote. So what happens in the political world is that there's that public voter file that has that basic information. So we know that this person voted in 2020, but did not vote in 2018. They did not vote in 2016, but they voted in 2015. You know, like we know that kind of information. We know that they show up in a primary and a general, or they just vote in a general. That basic voter file is taken by the parties, by third-party vendors, all these different groups, and they layer different information on top of that. So what your political party will have locally is usually that basic voter file that they've then paid a vendor to layer on top of that campaign finance reports, different buying habits, different algorithms that can tell us a little bit more about how we think this person is probably going to vote, whether they're Democrat, Republican, or unaffiliated. And it just starts to help you understand that district a little bit more. And then these last few, I'm probably going to go through a little bit quickly so we can leave some time here for questions. But 21 is reading your local newspaper every day, whether that's an online newspaper, we're losing our hometown newspapers at an alarming rate, but subscribe to whatever your local newspaper or news source is, and really stay on top of what's going on in the area. And in that process, then you'll be getting to know your local reporters. So, reporters only hear from people when they're upset with something they've written. So start to make friends with those reporters. Thank them for coverage that's good, and offer yourself out there as a resource to those reporters on some of those issues. So if you can call up a reporter, maybe your issue was around environmental issues, is something you care about, and then a local reporter writes about the PFAS, or I think it's how you say PFAS, contamination in your local water source, and you call them up and say, thank you so much for doing that piece. It's really important. Here's why I think it's important. Now you have just raised their journalist antennae to say, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. I might be able to reach out to them when I do my next story. And again, that just helps raise your visibility. We want to encourage you to stop using the just, the sorry, the like. I've probably done that a few times myself during this training. There's a video attached to this that I'm going to skip for now, but I encourage you to go look for that Why Are Women Always Over Apologizing video, so that we can really see the difference that it makes when you shift from, saying, I'm sorry, but I have a question, to just saying, I have a question about what we're doing here, and making that shift to give yourself more authority, give yourself more autonomy. We do not apologize for existing in this world. We do not apologize for taking up space, whether that's physical space or airspace. We need to be confident in what we're putting forth and back that up there. And here's where we start to tell our story a little bit more out there in the public. And so back when you've started making friends with those reporters, and even, the people that you've had coffee with earlier in this process, they're going to, you're always going to be in their top of mind. And there's going to come a time when there's an event or a town hall of some kind where they're going to call you and ask you to share your story and share your expertise there. So we want to encourage folks to get used to sharing your own story of leadership, talking about, why you're interested in running for office or why you became an expert on these issues, as a way to just keep building your comfort level with being in the public eye. Making a list of your political heroes always helps, always having something to look to for inspiration. I've got Eleanor Roosevelt up here right in front of me now, and Shirley Chisholm, Rosie the Riveter, so making a list of your political heroes is going to help get you through a lot of this. We also want to make sure that you're doing things that are not political. Balance is always important. Finding ways to spend time with family, spend time by yourself, being able to get into routines of self-care, taking, not necessarily going to get a pedicure all the time, but, how is it that you're engaging in the world in a way that's not political, that is just for you? Getting out to those community events when we start having them again, and we have been having them all the way through. So if there are ways to safely engage in this pandemic time in events, or at least be doing them virtually, get you out there. Going to virtual events outside your sector. So again, understanding, how things are playing out. So if you are, say, going back to the environmental issue area, if that's something that you care about and you were in favor of the removal of the Line 5 pipeline in the Mackinac Straits here in Michigan, going to some of the oil industry's public hearings that they might have been having on this, really understanding, out the other side of your issue, but then also outside your sector altogether. So finding out, if you're in the nonprofit world, what is the business community talking about these days? And we always encourage folks to bring a friend along. Bringing a friend along is a good way for you to feel more confident when you're running for office. We have seen this time and time again throughout the many years that I personally have been working with candidates, and that Vote Run Lead has been doing work, in particular with women candidates, is that it's always better when you're running with a friend. So finding some other people to run for office, or at least bringing them along with you on the campaign journey will help inspire more women to run. And then finally, we just want to talk about running as you are. So owning your full, authentic self, owning your ambition, owning the change that that you can bring if you're elected to this office, and don't apologize for it. So there's, all sorts of advice that you'll get when you announce that you're running for office, and people will come out of the woodwork to tell you what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. Particularly for women, there's a lot of stuff around, what they're wearing, what you wear. Like if I were a candidate doing this workshop right now, there's a bunch of people who would have told me I should have done my hair and put my makeup on and done all that kind of stuff, but that's not who I am. And if I'm wearing a bunch of makeup, if I've got fancy hair, I've been futzing with it the whole time. So just be who you are. Own who you are in this world. If you're an awkward person, own your awkwardness. Like just be out there and run as you are. And so I want to take us off of the presentation here and just open it up to some questions, knowing that we have there's about 5 minutes left here, but I'm willing to stay on as long as people have questions. So be sure to check us out online. We'll share some follow-up with you once we get the registration list. So I'm gonna look out here and see, feel free to raise your hand or throw a question in the chat box. If there's any questions people have. I feel like I really breezed through that, so. Any questions? I'm trying to see if there's any hands raised.
I received one question via chat to me, Shannon.
Yeah.
This participant is not interested in running for elected office, but has their eye on an appointed position in the Biden administration. Does Vote Run Lead advise in this direction, or who would you suggest that they get in touch with for guidance, suggestions, etc.?
Yes, great question. Similar steps here. So, thinking about who do you know, appointed positions are very important positions, whether they're in a presidential realm or at your local city council has boards and commissions. They're a great way for you to influence policy, influence, legislation, all that kind of stuff. So yes, go for appointments. And the process to get those is similar, except for when you think about who your voting pool is, it's a different group of people. It's whoever makes that appointment. So I would go through the same process, figure out who is it that actually makes that appointment, who are the people that advise them on that, and how do you get to those people. And so using your contact lists, using your networks, talking to your local political party leaders, talking to your state party leaders, make those connections along the way, and pursue it for sure. And feel free to reach out too, to me personally, and I can put my contact information in the chat box there. And you know me now, just from having listened to me for an hour. So feel free to reach out to me and see who I might know.
And Shannon, somebody else had a question about being able to get voter lists for which party voters are registered with. And I that is publicly accessible, correct?
Shannon.smu.edu. Okay, so I just threw my email address in the chat box. So the publicly accessible voter list will only tell you who the voters are, what their address is, that they're registered at, and I believe their age. Getting to find out whether or not they're a Democrat or Republican is something that you would go through your local political party for, because again, what's happened is somebody has taken that public information and then layered on what else we can find out about people. People talk about the NSA spying on people. They got nothing on voter file vendors. So they will go out and they can layer on subscriber information, any sort of public or data that can be bought. They can layer onto that voter file that gives us, and then they build the algorithms that tell us a little bit more about how that person is likely to vote. In some states, there is legitimate party registration. So you go in and you actually register as a Democrat or a Republican. Here in Michigan, we don't have party registration. So our best guess as to how someone votes is based on voting patterns, voting areas, campaign finance reports that tell us that person, because that's public, to say I donated $20 to a Democrat. You start layering all that up, and that's what helps you out there. I see a question here in the chat box about if there's a system of political mentors here in Michigan. That's a really great question. I don't know that there's anything public, but there's definitely, underground networks. I don't know what you call them. So there's always, the smoke-filled good old boys room. That definitely exists. And part of the problem for us as women, for people of color, for communities of people who are underrepresented currently, they're not always in those rooms. And so we have to make those mentorships ourselves. And I know that there's, there's organizations like My List, which is now under Planned Parenthood, that was to try to encourage more Democratic pro-choice women to run for office. There's the Michigan Excellence in Public Service program that the Republican women, and so they are trying to link people up with other people to talk about running for office. But I always encourage people to think about how they can create that locally for themselves. So if you're interested in getting a political mentor, go through this process that we just talked about and find some of them, and then help broaden that circle and just keep building it out and hooking people up with each other. So I hope
Shannon, I have a quick question for
yeah,
you. So you've talked a lot about things we can do, to put ourselves out there that will help us get over whatever sort of insecurities or awkwardness. But I don't know, like I'm thinking about this, thinking, wow, this sounds so easy, and yet I'm imagining how badly I would stick my foot in my mouth. So I wonder if you can some encouragement or some like how these kinds of activities can really transform those of us who really, it's very hard to envision putting ourselves out there like that.
yeah. My first response to that is, have you seen who's in office right now? And listen to what people say. I mean, there's,
Point.
I think that our fear prevents us from achieving what we are destined to achieve. So that's where I think going through this process of taking these actions. So it's not like you're just putting yourself out there tomorrow and calling yourself an expert on an issue and putting your opinions all over the place. This is a process that you're building confidence in it. And just like whatever profession you're in, whatever career you've made for yourself, whatever life you've created, even your hobbies, like the way that you can talk with comfort about those things can be translated into doing it in a more public format. So it's, some people are willing to jump in with both feet and just go out there and try it. But some people need to work up to it a little bit more. And so that's where having these one-on-one meetings, calling those reporters, doing that research is all different ways for you to feel more comfortable. The other thing to know is you are going to step in it occasionally. I mean, none of us are perfect. And again, look to who's been elected since the dawn of our democracy. So when it comes to the voters and living a publicly political life, the more authentic that you've been from the beginning, the more understanding that people will be if you say something wrong or you screw something up, because they'll have seen from the get-go that you've always been honest in how you're presenting yourself to the world and admitting, I don't know a whole lot about that issue and I'm willing to learn more. So if you're getting comfortable there, then when you are in a space where you say something that, you're like, geez, I don't know where that came from, people will understand in responding to you. So I hope that answers the question.
That does. Thank you.
Okay. I see another great question here in the chat box, knowing that we're a little bit over time, but just to share. So somebody asked if there was any advice for people who are not citizens or legally can't legally vote for other reasons, about how they can get involved. And I think that's a great question. I mean, if you are living in this community, in this country, in our communities, you have just as much of a voice, even when you might not have a vote. So the first thing I would say to that is make sure that you don't actually have a vote, because like here in the state of Michigan, the only time you cannot legally vote is if you are not a citizen, and if you are currently incarcerated. So we don't have what's commonly referred to as felon disenfranchisement in the state of Michigan. Once you have served your time and you are re-entering society, you can register to vote that day. And in fact, our Michigan Secretary of State has instituted a program with the Department of Corrections that they're registering people to vote as they're released. So I would make sure that, are you eligible or ineligible to vote? But then you can do all those other things. You can volunteer on campaigns. You can help make introductions. You can help raise visibility on issues, become an expert. For some people who might not be here, are undocumented, and might not want to be visible, outspoken publicly on an issue, then try to see what supports are needed behind the scenes to be able to help lift your stories and the story of your community into the public discourse. There's always ways to get involved, and so I would just start going through that list and seeing what here can I do, and how can I help, and how can I support the candidates who will help make the change that I want to see. All right. Well, I think that's about it. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and apologize. Well, I'm not going to apologize for going over because I like to talk about this.
We loved listening. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Shannon. And there's information. Make sure you get Shannon's email address. She popped that into the chat box. This was great. Thank you. Really inspiring. And gave me ideas for how we can support more people running for office, because that's ultimately what we're looking to do.
Excellent. And just to remind people, if they go to Vote Run Lead, they can download. There's a version of this already recorded from a different presentation, but the worksheets itself has everything that was in the slides laid out, right there on paper.
So everyone have a nice evening. Please, if you aren't registered for Governor Whitmer's keynote comments tomorrow, you can still do that. If you've registered for the conference, we'll see you bright and early tomorrow at 9. Thank you so much, Shannon.
Thank you. I'll see you all in the others.
Bye-bye.
Other things. All right. Bye-bye.